Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. Today I'm going to show you how I gesso my canvases. I first start by making sure it's on a flat surface, and then I go ahead and do a really small mist of water, and it's very minimal water that I'm putting on there. Make sure you shake up your bottle really well in order to kind of mix up what's in the bottle. And then I go ahead and I start just squirting it all over the canvas. I want to make sure that I have enough on the canvas that when I spread it out with my putty knife, it is going to spread evenly. And I'm using quite a bit of pressure to apply this and really push it into the weave of the canvas. This is the step where you want to make sure that you put the gesso on in every spot of that canvas. I'm not worried about any of the ridges right now because I'll show you in a minute what I do to get rid of those. I enjoy using the palette knife a lot better than a brush because with the brush you tend to get some, brush strokes, some where you would see the hair bristles and everything. I prefer to use this method. This is how I get all my canvases nice and smooth, and it allows me to be able to add a little bit more detail in all my paintings. So as you can see, I go over it multiple times to make sure that every inch of that canvas is covered in that gesso. And I generally go in all different directions just to make sure it's getting into the weave of that canvas really well. So now I grab a paper towel and I am kind of scooping off any excess gesso, just so it's not quite as much of a mess when I go in with the ruler in a moment. This is a messy process, so you want to make sure that you've got lots of paper towels handy, and you don't wear clothes that you're worried about getting paint on because it tends to get everywhere. This was a pre-primed canvas. However, I like to make sure that there's a nice smooth surface, and I haven't found a canvas yet that allows me to just go in without prepping it. So now I'm taking in the ruler, and you want to make sure the ruler that you're using or metal piece that you're using is as wide as your canvas. The goal for this is to do one smooth stroke down, and that evens out all of the putty knife marks or anything. It really just allows for a nice surface. So once that is completely dry, and it was about 2 hours before it was completely dry, I went in with some 320 grit sandpaper and gently, very, very gently, just kind of sanded down the majority of the surface. It doesn't need much sanding on this first layer. So now once I have sanded that first layer down, I go in and repeat the process. Again, making sure I apply enough gesso in the first layer to cover the entire canvas. And you want to have all of your supplies nearby and ready to go and handy because you don't want this gesso to start its drying process and start tacking up. Otherwise, it will be a mess and you'll have to just let it dry and completely sand it down again. Make sure that you work that gesso right over to the edge. Some people gesso the sides. I don't feel it's necessary. I usually don't do a ton of painting detail on the sides, so If you want, you can gesso the sides. I usually just do the painting surface that I'm gonna be, that is, you know, the main part of the painting. Again, one swoop with the ruler. Nice even flow. You don't want any start and stop points. And I noticed that I didn't apply it completely to one of the corners, which you'll see in a moment. So I had to go back in and reapply it with the putty knife and then go back over it with the ruler one more time. I want to make sure I use the clean edge of the ruler, so I flipped that around and do another swoop down the canvas. And then while that is still wet, you want to go through the edges and make sure if there's any drips or anything on the edges of the canvas, you scoop those up. So now dry it again completely, and we're going to begin sanding for the second layer. This one is a little bit more of an intensive sanding. I'm still using the 320 grit sandpaper, but I do want to make sure, since I'm only doing 2 coats on this canvas, I want to make sure that I get it completely smooth and get out any little ridges that might be in there that I don't want, especially along the edges. Those are important as well. Right on that seam where it starts to turn for the canvas edge, the gallery wrap canvas edge, I want to make sure that that has a nice clean surface right there. And this took about 2.5 hours to dry completely. It is very, very, very important that you make sure that it is completely dry before putting the next layer on. And I usually gesso all of my canvases in one go, so it'll be a gesso day. While one's drying, I go ahead and put the next one on. Because it is so time consuming, I just wrap it all up into one day, and then when you're ready to paint, you have canvas ready to go. And I'm not using a ton of pressure when I am sanding, so just keep that in mind. Only the areas that maybe had a little bit more buildup of paint am I putting a lot of pressure on, but generally it's a very soft pressure. I'll also let this dry overnight and before I start putting any paint on it, just to make sure it's fully cured. And then you're ready to paint. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please like and subscribe, comment if you have any questions, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks.